On a warm August morning in 1942, a woman named Helena Weiss sat at the edge of her kitchen table, a pencil trembling between her fingers. Her suitcase, small, worn, impossibly light for the weight it carried, rested by the door. Outside, the street was too quiet, as if the entire world were holding its breath. Inside, the clock ticked with a rhythm that felt cruelly indifferent. She had been ordered to report for relocation within the hour, but before she stepped into whatever waited for her, she needed to leave something behind. Not for herself, for her daughter. Her daughter, Ruth, was 8 years old and asleep in the next room under the watch of a neighbor. Unaware that her mother would walk through the door for the last time, Helena had kissed her forehead before dawn, lingering longer than she should have, memorizing the warmth of the child she might never see again. Love filled her chest so painfully she had to steady herself against the wall. Now she pressed the pencil to paper, a thin sheet torn from a notebook, all she had left. She didn't write about fear, she didn't write about rumors whispered quietly at night. She didn't write about the unknown place she was being taken to. Instead, she wrote about the only thing she knew with absolute certainty: her love for her daughter. "My Ruth," she began, her handwriting small and deliberate, "if this letter reaches you, it means life carried you farther than it carried me. It means the world still allowed you to grow." She paused, swallowing the ache in her throat. Every sentence felt like stitching together a goodbye she wasn't ready to give. She wrote about the lullabies she used to sing, the way Ruth laughed with her whole body, the promise she always made, that no matter what happened, a mother's love did not disappear. Helena folded the letter carefully and slid it into the lining of her coat, a place she hoped no one would search. She wasn't sure why she did it. Maybe she believed she would somehow find a way to give it to her daughter herself. Maybe she hoped a stranger would find it someday. Maybe she simply needed the words written, even if they never reached their home. Moments later, a knock at the door shattered the silence. Helena stood, smoothed her dress, and picked up her suitcase. Before leaving, she placed her palm on Ruth's bedroom door. "Dream something beautiful," she whispered. "Keep that part of the world alive." The walk to the transport point felt like moving through water. Slow, heavy, unreal. Neighbors watched from behind curtains. Some looked away, some looked ashamed. A few whispered her name as if saying it aloud might break her further. At the station, people stood in lines, holding bags that carried pieces of entire lives. A guard motioned Helena forward, but just as she stepped ahead, a sudden gust of wind lifted the hem of her coat, revealing the hidden slit in the lining where the letter had been tucked. The guard didn't notice, but the woman behind her did. Her name was Amelia, a stranger in every sense, except for the fact that she, too, was a mother. She leaned close enough to whisper without moving her lips, "You dropped something." Helena glanced down in panic, but the letter was still inside. Amelia's eyes softened, as if she understood without needing to see. "You must keep that hidden," she murmured. Helena nodded silently. A bond formed between them, brief, fragile, yet profound. Two women standing on the edge of uncertainty, clinging to the last pieces of themselves. The train doors opened. People stepped inside. Helena followed, never once loosening her grip on the lining of her coat. That was the last confirmed moment of her life. For decades, the letter remained lost to the world, passed from hand to hand, hidden, protected, carried across borders, sealed in a forgotten box. A message frozen in time, waiting for the day it would finally reach the girl it was written for. A girl who had grown into a woman without ever knowing her mother's final words. 50 years would pass before the letter found its way home. For 50 years, Ruth lived with a single sentence, echoing inside her, "My mother didn't get to say goodbye." It followed her into adulthood, into marriage, into motherhood. It lived in the hollow places of her memory, places built out of silence rather than stories. She carried fragments, the smell of her mother's hair, the warmth of her hands, the rhythm of her voice when she hummed. But the details had faded. Time had thinned them into something fragile and uncertain. She grew up in the care of distant relatives who loved her, but not in the same way. Their love was careful, polite, always with the quiet expectation that she would not ask too many questions. The war had taken too much from everyone. Grief had become a language no one wanted to speak aloud. So Ruth learned to stop asking. She learned to tuck her longing into neat corners of herself. As an adult, she became a teacher, drawn to children who clung to reassurance the way she once had. She married a gentle man named Daniel, who quickly learned that she never left the house without checking twice, sometimes 3 times, that the door was locked behind her. When their daughter Leah was born, Ruth held her so tightly the nurses had to remind her to let the baby breathe. Safety became her religion. Certainty became her shield. But even as she built a new life, her past hovered like a faint outline behind every joy. At night, when the world quieted, she wondered where her mother had stood during her final hours. What she had felt, whether she had been afraid, whether she had tried to call out her daughter's name, whether there had been a chance, even a tiny one, that she had survived. Ruth had long stopped believing in miracles, but she still prayed for clarity. One afternoon in 1992, while she was grading papers at her dining table, the phone rang. The voice on the other end was unfamiliar, marked by an accent she couldn't place. "Is this Mrs. Ruth Bernstein?" "Yes," she answered cautiously. "My name is Elias. I work with a historical tracing service. I believe we have found something that belongs to you." She froze. Her chest tightened. "Something that belongs to me?" There was a pause, respectful, careful, before he continued. "We have recovered a letter. It appears to have been written by your mother." The room seemed to tilt. The pencil slid from her hand. She gripped the edge of the table to keep herself grounded. "A letter?" she repeated, unsure if the words made sense out loud. "Yes, Mrs. Bernstein. It was discovered in a collection donated by the family of a woman who survived the war. Your mother's name is written inside. The date Mateus, the day she was taken." Ruth's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had written to her. Her mother had left something. Her mother had tried. She hadn't been abandoned. She hadn't been forgotten. She hadn't been left without a goodbye. "Can I see it?" she whispered. "We can mail it," Elias replied gently, "but many people prefer to receive such items in person. You may visit our office, or we can deliver it to your home." Home, the place where she had whispered questions into the dark for 50 years. "I'll come," she said quickly. "Please, I'll come." The next morning, Ruth traveled to the tracing office, a small, unassuming building 2 cities away. The lobby smelled faintly of paper and old books. Walls were lined with photographs, documents, yellowed records, lives frozen in the moments just before they were scattered to time. A kind-faced man stepped forward. "Senora Ann Bernstein, I'm Elias." He guided her to a private room. There, on the table, rested a small envelope, brown, wrinkled, edges brittle with age. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. She hesitated, afraid that touching it might somehow erase what little remained of her mother. Elias nodded softly. "Take your time." Ruth lifted the envelope, feeling its weight impossibly light, yet heavier than anything she had ever held. Her eyes blurred before she even opened it. Inside was a single folded page. The handwriting was delicate, careful, undeniably familiar in a way she couldn't explain. The moment she saw the first line, her breath broke. "My Ruth." Her mother's voice filled the room. Ruth pressed her hand to her mouth, overwhelmed by the collision of past and present. 50 years of silence cracked open in an instant. She didn't cry. Not at first. She sat completely still, absorbing every curve of the letters, every word written by a hand she had once held. The goodbye she never received had traveled half a century to find her, and she wasn't ready for the truth it carried. Ruth unfolded the letter with the tenderness of someone holding a living thing. The paper crackled softly, fragile from time, yet stubbornly intact, as if it had waited decades for this exact moment. Her mother's handwriting moved across the page in small, deliberate strokes, the kind of penmanship taught in a world that no longer existed. "My Ruth," it began. "You are 8 years old as I write this, and you are asleep in your bed. I watched you breathe this morning before the sun rose. You dreamed of something sweet. I could tell by the way your lips curled at the corners. I pray your dreams will always stay sweeter than the world." Ruth's chest tightened. She didn't remember that morning. She didn't remember being watched, or kissed, or whispered to, but she could see it now. Her mother standing in the doorway, imprinting every small detail of her onto memory, knowing it had to last her forever. "I do not know where I am going," the letter continued, "but I know what I am leaving behind, and that is the part that breaks me." Ruth's breath trembled. The ache she had carried her whole life, the sense of being discarded, of being forgotten, dissolved one sentence at a time. Her mother hadn't let go of her. She had been torn away. "If the world is kind to you," Helena wrote, "you will grow up. You will have birthdays, friendships, laughter. You will live in ways I will not get to see. That will be my greatest comfort." Ruth felt something inside her collapse. For decades, she had believed that her mother's last thoughts might have been filled with terror. But here, preserved across 50 years, was proof of something else. Love as fierce as life itself. "I want you to remember this above all," the letter went on. "There is nothing wrong with surviving. There is nothing wrong with joy. If the world gives you goodness, take it. I give you permission to live a life bigger than the one I was allowed." Ruth pressed the paper to her chest as if trying to absorb her mother's words directly into the hollow spaces grief had carved. Tears finally came, slow at first, then unstoppable. They weren't the tears of a child abandoned, but of a woman being returned a piece of herself she never expected to recover. She kept reading through blurred vision. "I hope someone will place this in your hands one day. And if they do, it means you have made it. It means you have become the woman I always believed you would be. I will be with you in ways the world cannot measure. My love did not end when I left our home. It goes where you go." A sound escaped Ruth's throat. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Something raw and wordless. Half a century of longing untangled inside her, reshaping itself into something gentler. Understanding. There was one final line. "When you miss me, look toward the sky. I will meet you there." Ruth lowered the letter slowly. The room felt different now, filled with a stillness that didn't hurt. The ache remained, but it had changed shape. It was no longer sharp, no longer accusatory. It was simply what remained of love, interrupted. Elias quietly stepped back into the room, pausing when he saw her face. "Would you like a moment alone?" he asked softly. Ruth shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I've been alone with this for 50 years. Today, I don't want to be." He nodded with gentle understanding. On the drive home, the letter sat beside her on the passenger seat, secured in an archival folder. Every few minutes, she glanced at it, as if it might vanish, as if the universe might reconsider its generosity. She touched it lightly, whispering, "I found you. I finally found you." When she arrived home, her daughter Leah was waiting on the porch. Ruth stepped out of the car with trembling hands. "Mom, what happened?" Leah asked, rushing toward her. Ruth couldn't speak. She simply held out the folder. Leah opened it carefully, her eyes widening as she recognized the handwriting. "Is this—" "It's from her," Ruth said, her voice breaking. "She wrote to me. She tried to reach me." Leah wrapped her arms around her mother, and Ruth let herself be really held. For the first time since childhood, she felt something anchor inside her, something she didn't know she had been missing. A sense of being connected to the past, not by loss, but by love. That night, Ruth placed the letter on her bedside table. She read it again before falling asleep, tracing each word with her fingertips, as if learning her mother's voice through touch. For the first time in her life, she dreamed of Helena not as a silent ghost, but as a woman bending over a child's bed, whispering something hopeful into the darkness, a dream that felt like a memory returning home. The days that followed did not feel ordinary. The world looked the same, but something underneath it had shifted. For the first time, Ruth did not feel like a child abandoned in the middle of history. She felt like someone who had finally received an answer. Late, yes, but real. She kept the letter in a protective sleeve, but she did not lock it away. Instead, she placed it in the living room, where the family gathered. For 50 years, her mother had been a quiet presence in the background. Now, Helena was finally allowed to step into the center of the room. Leah read the letter again and again. She wrote like she knew. Leah said one evening, her voice soft, "She knew you would survive. She knew you would grow up." She wrote, "To the future." Ruth nodded slowly. "I spent most of my life wondering if she thought of me at the end," she admitted. "Now I know she thought of little else." They sat together on the couch, the letter resting carefully between them. "How did they find it?" Leah asked. After all this time, Ruth had wondered the same thing. The next week, she called Elias back and asked if he could tell her the full story. He invited her to return to the office. In the same small room, with the same quiet shelves and dim light, Elias opened a file and adjusted his glasses. "The letter's journey is almost as remarkable as the letter itself," he began. He told her about a woman named Amelia Stein, the stranger who had stood behind Helena in the line that day. Amelia survived the camps and eventually emigrated, carrying with her a coat she had been given near the end of the war. She rarely spoke about the past, but after her passing, her family found a small box among her things. Inside the box were documents, photographs, and a single folded piece of paper hidden in the seam of an old coat lining. The paper was worn but legible. "She must have found the letter after liberation," Elias explained. "Perhaps she recognized that it belonged to another woman. Perhaps she hoped one day it would find its way home. We'll never know exactly how she discovered it, but she kept it safe." Amelia's family, unsure what to do with the documents, donated everything to a historical archive. There, an archivist began cataloging the items. It should have been just another file in a sea of records, but the first line caught their eye. "My Ruth." It was not a generic note. It was addressed, personal, specific. "From there," Elias said, "we began tracing. We followed your mother's name, cross-referenced transport lists, resettlement records, and community registries. We found a record of a child with the same surname placed with relatives after the war. From that child, every path led to you." Ruth listened with a strange sense of awe. For years, she had believed that history only worked in one direction, forward relentlessly, leaving the past behind like debris. Now she was learning that sometimes, against all odds, the past reached forward on its own, searching. "When I was a girl," Ruth said slowly, "I used to imagine a message buried under the ground somewhere. I thought if I dug deep enough, I might find her words. I never imagined they were traveling toward me all along." Elias smiled faintly. "Sometimes history is kinder than we expect." On the way home, Ruth watched the landscape blur past the train window. The world was peaceful. Children on bicycles, people walking dogs, cafe tables set outside. She wondered what her mother would think of this version of the world. Would she be relieved? Would she recognize it? Would she believe that her daughter had grown up in a place where such ordinary things were possible? That night, Ruth sat at her kitchen table, the same place she had once stared at empty space, wishing for some proof of her mother's love. Now, the proof lay before her. She took out a fresh sheet of paper. "Dear Mama," she wrote. The words felt strange, but right. For 50 years, she had spoken to her mother only in thought, in silence, in unanswered prayers. Now she could answer a real letter. She told Helena about her life, the school she went to after the war, the way she always checked the doors twice, how she met Daniel Howe. They named their daughter Leah, after a relative who had not survived. She confessed fears she had never voiced out loud, the guilt she felt whenever she allowed herself to be happy, the sense that every joy needed permission. "You gave me that permission," she wrote, tears blurring the ink. "You told me I was allowed to live. I wish I had heard those words sooner, but I am grateful to hear them now." She folded the letter carefully, not to send it but to keep it beside her mother as the pieces of paper separated by half a century, finally sharing the same drawer. Weeks later, during a family dinner, Leah suggested something Ruth had avoided thinking about. "Mom," she said gently, "have you ever thought about going back to where she was taken?" The question hung in the air. Ruth's fork paused midway to her plate. "Auschwitz?" she asked quietly. Leah nodded. Not to glorify it, not to relive it, but to close the circle, to take her words back to the place where she wrote them. Ruth's first instinct was to say no. That place existed in her mind as a black hole, a point of no return where her mother's life ended and her own was torn in half. The idea of going there felt like stepping into a wound, but then she looked at the letter on the sideboard. She thought of the line, "Asterisk, when you miss me, look toward the sky. I will meet you there." Asterisk, what if she went, not as a child of the camps, but as a woman carrying her mother's voice into the open air? "I'm afraid," Ruth admitted. "I know," Leah replied. "We would go together." Ruth looked at her daughter, at her steady gaze, at the life she had built beyond fear, and realized something important. Her mother's letter had not only reached her, it had reached Leah, too. It had crossed 3 generations and refused to disappear. "Maybe it's time," Ruth said softly. "Maybe we should go." The decision did not erase the fear, but it did something else. It turned fear into movement. For the first time, Ruth wasn't just surviving her past. She was walking toward it. Not to be consumed, but to reclaim what it had tried to take. The plane touched down in Poland on a gray morning, the sky low and heavy, as if the clouds themselves remembered. Ruth stepped onto the tarmac with Leah beside her, fingers interlaced, both holding their breath for reasons neither needed to explain. This was not a trip. It was a return to a place Ruth had never been, but that had shaped her entire life. As they drove toward Auschwitz, Ruth watched the fields pass by, quiet, green, deceptively peaceful. She tried to imagine them in winter, 1943, when her mother had walked across similar land under armed guard. The contrast between then and now felt unreal, like 2 worlds occupying the same coordinates but never touching. When they arrived at the memorial site, the air carried that strange stillness Ruth had always associated with cemeteries. Except here, the silence felt deeper, as if the ground was holding its breath. Leah placed a gentle hand on her mother's back. "Take your time." Ruth nodded. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, slowly, she stepped through the gate. She had seen pictures of it countless times, in books, in documentaries, in classrooms, but standing there in person was different. The large brick buildings, the watchtower, the rails that ended abruptly, it all looked achingly ordinary, which somehow made it more horrifying. Humans had built this. Humans had operated it. Humans had walked into it, thinking they were going to work. To showers, to resettlement, unaware of the truth. Ruth's breath trembled. She reached into her coat and touched the folded letter she carried, the one Helena had written with shaking hands more than half a century earlier. The paper felt warm from being pressed against her heart. A guide approached respectfully. "If you need help finding a specific area, please let me know." "Thank you," Ruth replied. "I'm here to bring something back to where it began." She and Leah followed the gravel path until they reached a quiet corner where visitors rarely lingered, a place lined with stones, each carrying names, fragments of families who had vanished. Ruth placed her hand on one stone, not because it belonged to someone she recognized, but because it felt like the right moment to connect with the collective memory of those who never left. "Mom," Leah whispered, "do you want to sit?" Ruth nodded and lowered herself onto a bench. She closed her eyes. For a moment, all she heard was wind against the grass. Not cries, not boots, not commands, only wind. And she chose to believe that the peace, belonged to her mother now, not the terror. She opened her eyes and looked up at the sky. The clouds were beginning to part, revealing a pale light. She reached into her coat and took out the letter. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered. "I brought your words home." Leah held her breath as Ruth unfolded the fragile paper. The ink faded but still legible. Ruth didn't read it aloud. She didn't need to. She knew every line by heart. absorbed into her bones. Instead, she placed her second letter, the one she had written weeks ago, beside it. Two pieces of a story that had waited decades to be written. She didn't leave them there, exposed to wind or rain. She simply pressed the two letters together in her hands, letting the symbolism complete itself in silence. A circle closed, a mother's last message embraced by the child who had survived it. After a long moment, Ruth stood. "Let's walk," she said. Leah nodded, relieved at the steadiness in her mother's voice. They walked past barracks, past fences, past remnants of a machinery built for destruction. But Ruth didn't feel crushed. She felt anchored to her mother, to history, to every generation that had come after. At one point, Leah slipped her arm through Ruth's and whispered, "She would be proud of you." Ruth swallowed hard. "I hope so. I hope she sees that her letter didn't end Witma, it reached you. And one day, it will reach your children." As they left the memorial grounds, Ruth turned one last time. Not out of fear or grief, but gratitude. Her mother had entered this place with nothing but hope for her daughter's survival, and now, decades later, Ruth was leaving it with both letters in her hands, proof that hope had not been misplaced. That night, in a small hotel room with soft lamps and warm blankets, Ruth wrote a final note in her journal. History did not forget her, and neither will I. She slipped the journal beside the letters, creating a small archive of her own, one not stored in boxes or basements, but carried forward through testimony, memory, and love. In the morning, she and Leah boarded their flight home. As the plane rose through the clouds, sunlight illuminated the cabin. Ruth looked out the window, toward the brightening sky. "When you miss me," her mother had written, "look toward the sky. I will meet you there." Ruth pressed her forehead to the window and smiled softly. "I'm here, Mama," she whispered, "and I'm finally at peace."